Today is September 26, 2013. I am interviewing William E Alfonsi at his home in Jamestown, PA. Mr. Alfonsi is 93 years of age and was born on January 27, 1923. My name is Chuck Jennings, the interviewer. Mr. Alfonsi, what branch of service did you serve?
I was in 3rd Army Intelligence.
And what was the highest rank you achieved?
4th class sergeant.
It was technical sergeant.
Technical, yes.
And where did you serve?
I served in the European theater and England.
Before we get into that, let's start back in high school. And where did you grow up at?
I was born and raised in Niles, Ohio.
And you went to high school there?
I went to McKinley High School.
Did you play any sports, run, basketball?
I ran.
You ran track.
Yeah, I ran track, but high hurdles. I ran hurdles.
And later on, you decided to go on to college. But before we get into that, did you have any other jobs that helped when you were in high school to help support the family at that time?
Well, at that time in history, most young people worked. I worked for a millionaire taking care of their lawn, and that's where I got introduced in interior design. And then I delivered telegrams and ended up owning the Postal Telegraph Office. And then my dad had a friend, Mr. Fusco, had dry cleaning. So I went out there and learned how to press pants and suits. The suits were I paid 5 cents for a jacket and 2 cents for the vest and 5 cents for a pair of pants. And then other times I just went to the railroad yard and rode around Mr. Rogers on his switch engine.
Now, eventually you went to college. And where did you go to college at?
I went to Miami University in 1942 in the summer, and I went back in the fall.
Well, you had some jobs at Miami University. What were some of the jobs that you did there to support yourself?
I always cooked, so I baked pies and cakes on Friday night and Saturday and sold them house to house. And then I also there worked at a dry cleaning place.
So you were in college in 42. Then one day they were giving tests?
Well, when I'd been back in the fall, in October, they asked us to go down to Main Hall, and they offered to give us tests. They didn't tell us what for. There were about 1,300 men there at that time at Miami, and they gave us all this tests. And then a few weeks later, they came back, and they called us down there, and they asked us some more questions. And we finally found out it was to get us to volunteer into U.S. Army Intelligence, and I volunteered.
Now, once you volunteered, where did you go to get your uniform and things like that?
Well, first thing I went to be inducted in Columbus, Ohio at Fort Hays, and then we went from Fort Hays to Camp Crowder, Missouri, and that's where that was our basic training camp, and we got all of our Army clothes there. I got a simple uniform that we transported by bus to Camp Crowder.
Well, you said you got your uniforms and did your basic there. By that, did you learn about a rifle, throw hand grenades?
Nothing until we got to Camp Crowder.
Okay.
We only stayed at Fort Hays maybe 11 days.
Then your actual boot camp was Camp Crowder then?
Jack Crowder.
So, go into some of the things that you learned there in basic training.
Well, naturally, you did basic training, which means you got up in the morning and you ran, and then you had breakfast, and then you did calisthenics, and then you did marching formation, and then after you did that for a few weeks, you were taught how to use a rifle, and you were taught minimum self-defense, and I ended up with a carbine, which was a neat gun. But when they trained us, they used those old Springfields, which are very heavy. But you use those Springfields until you were out of basic training and went to Fort Monmouth. And then we got our
Your M1, your carbine.
yeah, carbine.
So, you had some other experiences. How'd you do in the rifle range?
I got expert.
That was
I got an
because you
expert
did
level.
hunting, and you did some hunting elsewhere in your
Hunting?
early years. Did you do any hunting in Ohio?
Oh, I did beer hunting in Ohio, pheasant hunting in Ohio.
So it wasn't a far leap to learn how to use the .6.
Yeah, well, I learned how to use hunting because I had friends that were hunters, and we did target practice. We went out into the woods and we built places and we did target practice. And then when I was younger, I had a BB gun, but we mostly killed deer and pheasant.
Now, do you recall anything about throwing a hand grenade?
No,
No, you didn't have that.
never had a hand grenade in my hand.
Did you ever have any calisthenics where you got in trouble in boot camp?
Oh yeah, we had calisthenics. We had calisthenics, and we had push-ups, and we had run in place, and then you had obstacle courses where you crawled on your elbows and your shoulders through water and mud, and then through buildings as well, because if you couldn't get up and stick your head up, you might get it blown off.
So, after you completed your basic training, then you went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey,
Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
and that's when your unit was consolidated,
Yes.
and they pulled a bunch of different guys from everywhere.
Well, there were guys from camps all over, and they were selected, I think, my opinion is, on unusual intelligence, because there were some complicated things and they needed guys with higher IQ and people that could concentrate, because we were breaking codes and using international Morse code and doing technical things which required a lot of special education and personal dedication.
Now, your unit was in the 3rd Army, 108th Intelligent Unit,
118th
118th.
118th Radio Intelligence Corporation company.
So, at some point while you were there, you went to Camp Red Bank,
No, it's Red Bank, New Jersey.
Red Bank, New Jersey. And did you get a chance to go into New York on leave or anything?
Oh yeah, I went to New York. We weren't there that long, but probably 2 weekends, because I liked theater, and I went to see Mame when I was there, and went to some famous restaurants and stayed at a great hotel. And that was I only did that once, and then other times I visited the art museum and the library. And there usually was 2 of us together.
Now, the hotel you stayed at, you had saved a little bit of money or to get that room?
Well, rooms weren't expensive then. can't think of the name of the hotel. There, I'll say there's several, but one of them is still in existence today. It's famous. I'll think of it.
Well, then at some point you got back and got ready to ship overseas. So you got all your gear together in your sea bag and went down to the dock. And what kind of ship did you get aboard?
Well, it was called a Liberty ship, I think. The name of it was Union Mail. It wasn't very big, and it was powered by diesels, but it wasn't designed really for rough water. And when we crossed the Atlantic in December, and let me tell you, the waves were higher than the boat. You could look up at the wave coming down on the boat, and it would pitch and rock something fierce. We got into a bad storm, but then also we were being chased by submarines, so they kept on zigzagging all over the ocean. And there were, I don't know, 15 or 18 ships together, 500-600 feet apart.
And your ship carried around 1,000 guys, roughly.
I figured about, just under 1,000. And that means that you were on deck the better part of 18 hours. And then you'd go below, and then they did it in crews. And then you ate 3 meals a day, but they were a little rickety. They had little narrow tables, and if you set anything down and the boat moved up or down, your food would go in that direction. It'd slide from one end to the other, so you learned to hold on to it. But you had to stand up to eat. And if you had a knife or fork in your hand and you had your food plate, there was nothing you could do but just use one hand.
There were quite a few guys who were seasick.
Say that again?
There were quite a few guys on board who were seasick. They got seasick across it.
Everybody got seasick. I was one of the rare ones that didn't, because I've sailed, and the less liquid you eat, the better off you are. But the ocean was very, very rough for most of the time.
Most of the guys survived on what kind of candy bar?
What the hell did I call it?
Buster?
Buster bars, yeah. They were light blue and dark. They're like a Clark bar, but smaller.
And the saltine crackers, of course.
Yeah, well, saltine crackers. That's what you ate to keep from being sick. But the meals weren't too great. I think we had C rations on board that boat. C or D. They had chocolate in them.
Well, at some point you landed in Scotland, and you boarded some trucks, and it was at nighttime. It was pretty crowded. There were more people in that truck than ordinarily would be carried.
Oh yeah.
And where did they drive you to?
Well, they drove us to an area, and then they'd unloaded the truck, and I bet there were 40 guys in the back of that truck. But then we had Jeeps, and we had the VR trucks, and then we had the big truck that you hauled all the equipment in. But they dumped us off, and see, we landed at the Firth of the Clyde, and I remember that we walked most of the night, marched, and we landed at Lady Cavendish's country house. It was a stone building and a long driveway, and we were all really surprised because it was a pretty dark night. But a window opened, and this big American flag dropped out and was pulled back in instantly. And now the house looked dark because all the windows were darkened. And we went around back and went into the house. It was a beautiful mansion, and it had a big basement, and we went down there, and there was beer and cheese, and we never saw Lady Cavendish, only once, and she welcomed us. And I don't know how long we really stayed there, but I think it was about a week. And then we went to Dartford, Kent, and stayed at Madame Osterberg's cottage. It was a one-floor place, not many buildings, but while we were there, it got bombed a lot. And then we were allowed to go to town there, and their taverns over there were interesting. But I met a family. Their name was Finch. And I had a key to their house, and I went there one time, and there was an orange sitting on the table, and I ate it. Well, I found out later that they only got one orange a month, and that really bothered me. So I went to the mess and talked to the cook, and I said, "We have any oranges?" And he said, "Yeah, we got oranges." So I got him to give me one of those net bags of oranges, a couple dozen. And then I got him to give me 5 pounds of tea and 5 pounds of sugar. And those people were so excited, that it just wasn't available. And I said, "Well, share it with your neighbors," and that was it. And the other thing they had was, they had a meter outside, and you had to put a shilling in it to have heat and cooking. So I used to put shillings in it every time I went there. But the house was tiny. It was like 3 rooms end to end, and then upstairs there were 3 rooms end to end. But the rooms were not like we normally have. They were about 9 by 12 and very sparsely furnished, but they were kind people.
Now, also, when you mentioned previously about the bombing, you didn't really like the bomb shelter so much?
Well, number one, most of the bombing was done at night, or just in the evening. And I went to one bomb shelter, and I just didn't like being confined, so I would go out and stand in the doorway and watch when it went on. And sometimes you got hit by a little bit of shrapnel, which was white hot, and you get burned. But after the planes left, and they would come with trucks and shovels and shovel all that stuff off the streets. It was amazing. It was heavy, but there was a lot of it. You'd be surprised when those anti-aircraft guns start shooting off. There might have been 100 of them all going at one time. But it was scary, I'll tell you that. But it caused more fires than anything. And whole blocks would get burned down.
At some point, you went down to the docks, and this would have been sometime around June 7th, I take it? Or
yeah, they put us in trucks again and took us to the English Channel. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was white and hard rocks. And then there were, can't realize how dumb you are when you're 19, but they had these funny looking boats there, and they were long and not very deep. And then they had at one end they had what looked like a flat thing that lifted up, and the other end was square. And it's 30-some miles across the channel, and it was always rough. But there were, I can't tell you how many there were, but there were a lot of them. And they drove trucks on there, and equipment trucks and jeeps, and then, I don't know, I suppose there were 200 or 300 men on that, because they were crowded.
it was an LST, landing ship tank.
Yeah, that's right.
And what beach did you land at D+2?
I think Utah.
No, was that at night then, or?
It was at night. Well, it's twilight.
So you made your way off the beach, and what transpired once you got off the beach? Did you pick up your trucks then, or get organized?
Well, we walked a distance, and then there was all kind of bombs going up and grenades and guys screaming, and then in the middle of it I got a toothache, and I went to my captain. I said, I got a damn toothache. And he said, stand there a minute. And some guy came along with a suitcase and a folding chair. And he said, sit down. He put a syringe in my mouth, pulled my tooth, and I was gone within 3 or 4 minutes, running up the hill like everybody else. And then there was a lot of enforcements on that hill. And then I can't tell you how long, because it got night, and then we kept together and we landed on a road, and I think we marched someplace, and it was like a small campground, and we stayed there overnight, and I don't remember really what happened more than at that point. And let's see.
Did you get hooked up with your truck and equipment at some point?
Yeah, they had a motor pool, and all of the trucks were there, and everything was checked. More stuff was put in it, because wherever we went from there, we walked in formation, and we landed. That was still night. It was, by the time we got to our destination, I'll bet it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was Lady Cavendish's estate.
Well, no, this is after you hit Utah Beach.
Oh, after we hit Utah Beach.
Yeah.
But then we went to an orchard there. Excuse me. Yeah, we went to an orchard, and it was an apple orchard, and there were cherry trees. And then we stayed there overnight, and then I can't remember which town we went to. I think Barley Duke, but Barley Duke is towards Belgium. Yeah.
Well, there was a few places before Belgium you would have went. Let's get into the description of what your unit exactly did. You said they had 4 trucks that did
four. They called them DF trucks, and then we had 2 other trucks with semis behind them. The DF trucks are direction finders, and they would be located 3 or 4 miles apart, and we were given coordinates where to place them. And when the signals went out where the line crosses, where the enemy stored ammunition or food or gasoline or tanks or whatever, and then that information was passed to our generals, and then they were destroyed. We also, in the semi-trucks, there were tables, and there were sheets of paper, and they would break German code on there. There was 1,000 squares per sheet, I think it was. And everybody would put a certain amount in, and they kept on passing them down, and they would keep on adding them until they got a word. The first word they got was the key to that particular code, and then there was a lot of rushing, because we could take that and give it to somebody else who would transport into a usable code, and then we could break the code. They changed codes. You never knew whether it was a week, a month, or a day. So you had to constantly do that, and to keep up getting your messages. But we also had telephone wire was laid across along hedgerows and through the brush and everything else. The Germans would send spies in there at night to trim it, and then they would listen to what we were going to do. And, pardon me, and somebody say, oh, something's broken, it isn't working. And we'd have to go out and find it and repair it and come back. But that happened constantly. I mean, that was where they stole information. We didn't have radio or television as we have today.
The snipers would set up on the wire guys. You lost quite a few guys to snipers.
Most of the guys that were killed were either killed in blowed up trucks, or snipers would be up in trees, and there weren't very much. If you heard it, one of them shot, then everybody took off and hid or left that area until somebody found the sniper and got rid of him. But there was only one within maybe a mile square area. And sometimes there may be more. It depended on how close we were in getting information that they didn't want us to have, and they wanted to know what we were doing.
So we'll go into what you did, but one of the experiences that you experienced is when one of the cathode ray tubes went down, and the transport, how they got it to you, it must have been pretty secure.
Oh, yeah, we had a little 4-inch what's the name of that tube?
Cathode ray?
Cathode ray tube. And it was when we set out with these monitors to find a site by the cathode ray tube, the lines would cross in it, and then they would get coordinates off of that. But they were so rare at that time that when they brought it, you think they were bringing $400 million, because they were motorcycles, big trucks, command trucks, more Jeeps, and it had to be shipped by submarines from wherever it came from to get there, because to lose one was really something, and they had limited life because they were quite crude. And we had to run generators, P90 or something like that, but they used a lot of current.
So let's go into some your jobs. One of your job was at the teletype.
Yeah.
And explain exactly what that is, because I'm sure now not too many people would know, except our generation.
A teletype's like an electric typewriter. Only it's bigger, and it has all of the same things on it that a regular type does. But when you type a tape, and the tape is about 1/2 inch wide, and then that tape goes through a machine that codes it. And the teletype is electrically operated on. It runs by electric, and it makes a lot of noise. And then it is transferred into code, and then it depends on the method that they were going to send it. A lot of Morse code, International Morse code, was used, and a lot of it was Morse code was put over the telephone, and some of it also, if it wasn't too far, they would send a person with that message and to Shape headquarters, a runner. And some of them drove Jeeps, but they made too much noise.
So typically you would have an 8-hour day? You would have an 8-hour day on the teletype, or?
Oh, how we worked in shifts, but there was so much commotion that sometimes you work 6 hours and you went and got a bite to eat and took a nap, and if a lot of things were going on, you might have worked 10 or 12 hours, or you may have been asked to do some other job because that person was busy or doing. You switched jobs all the time. There was nothing. It depended on what the need was at the moment, and then you did it. And then you very rapidly learned what you were good at, and that's the thing you volunteered for, because you weren't good at everything. I used to do maybe 40, 50 words a minute in Morse code. A lot of guys did 100.
Sometimes you would chase down broken wires.
Well, see, it was just black 2-strand wire, and you carry the reel of it. 2 guys could carry 100-yard reel of it, or 1,000-yard reel of it. I don't remember how much, but it was pretty heavy. But it was, compared to today's quality, it was pretty mediocre. But it was coated with like black tar. But you would run it over trees, through trees, along fence rows. But the Germans knew it was there, so they'd send a guy out at night to cut it. and they'd either stay there and listen to what they could listen to, or they'd copy, they'd send the Morse code out from that again. But then if they got the message, they had to write it down. I don't know how they did that, or because there's, in Morse code, a letter is either 2 dots and 1 dot, or 3 dots and 1 and 2 dots, and that's all interchangeable to make out a 5-letter word. So it would take some time. But more compared to today, more was sort of primitive, but that's how they do it. And then everybody had spies looking out for what was going on. But when war is war, and it's very rapid, there's no schedule, you just do whatever you do, sleep whenever you can. And we were in 2 or 3 miles maybe of the actual front, but sometimes we moved 2 or 3 times a day because all these generals were sending troops in all kinds of directions.
Now, part of your education before you went overseas, you had to speak 3 languages.
Say that again, please.
Be part of your education before you went overseas, you had to be able to speak 3 languages.
Well, they sent us to the University of Georgia, and I don't know how long we were there, but it was months. And they put you in a cubicle like a phone booth. You had a stool to sit on, and they put earphones on your ears. And that's all you did was sit there. And eventually, somehow your mind absorbed whatever was done. I don't know how they did that. I don't remember getting a shot or anything else, but you learned by listening. And then when you went back, you would hear what you heard yesterday in German or French or Luxembourgish, and then you'd hear today, and then you would be able to know what you said was in French or German. They only taught 1 language at a time, and maybe for 2 or 3 days, and then you'd go to a different phone booth and there would be a person there to tell you what to do. But you didn't do much, you just sat and listened. I used to think that they maybe hypnotized you, but I don't remember, and I don't have any proof of that, but I still don't understand how you can sit in the booth for 5 or 6 hours, but it was many, many days. But they had to have a method, because they even taught people how to play the piano like that.
Now, you hooked up with a friend, and he kind of looked out for you.
Yeah, I met an American Indian. He was a neat guy. Now, realize I was 5'7". I weighed 133 pounds, and Walter was 6'2" and weighed 229 pounds. And he said, "You and I are going to be partners throughout this war." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Whatever happens, we'll be together." So I looked at him and I said, "Well, I don't have to worry about one thing. You can take care of both of us." And he says, "That ain't the way it is." And I kept on looking at him. Indians are amazing people. They look strong, but they're mean and positive and very honest. And I was joking with him. He didn't like to be. He thought this was all too serious, and I was acting like a little kid. But so anyway, he wanted me to learn to take care of myself and self-defense, and I didn't want to learn, so I got arrogant and pouted, and he just disappeared and left me by myself for days. I'd find food sitting around or water sitting around, but no place to sleep. I had to figure that out on my own. When I was with Walter, he made a bed for both of us, and he fed me every day. But the thing that about it is that he was never mean, never nasty, but he said to me, if you lie to me one time and I find out, you're going to be left here alone, and I don't care whether you die here, get captured, or whatever, because I don't want to live with nobody that's a liar. If you're a liar, you're not a man, you're nobody. And so that was a loyal statement, and it really made a lot of difference to me. I think it made me a better person.
Now, Walter was kind of a independent person. You were receiving sniper fire one day, and this is how you got to get a pistol to bring home. But go into that story.
Well, I've always been compassionate, and more that's stupid. And a lot of places there were ruins, and you could hear babies crying, you could hear women whimpering, you could hear all kind of noises. And I started to go toward that one day. It was about 100 yards away. He grabbed hold of me and threw me against a tree, and he said, "You sit there." And he was never mean, but that's what he said, so that's what I did. And he was gone for about 20 minutes. And he came back and he threw a Luger down on the ground in front of me. He said, "Well, that's over with." I said, "What's over with?" Well, he said, "The guy that was shooting, there was a sniper there waiting to kill you." He said, "That's why they create all that noise, so they can pick us off." He said, "You got to be kidding." He said, "Well, I'm not." He said, "He's dead, and I broke up his rifle, and there's something for you to remember." And that was it. And they had snipers in trees. Most of our people that got killed were either got killed in a truck wreck, but most of them got killed by snipers.
Now you had a captain. Again, about the snipers, you had a captain who was there just.
Yeah, we lost a lot of officers because they were with the guys all the time. They were checking on what we were doing, and they were out checking the DFs and doing whatever. Well, we got this guy. He looked like a professional football player. He was handsome, he was big, he was warm, he was friendly. He only lasted one day, and he was gone. And I always thought, well, I always wanted to be an athlete, but a little guy doesn't get hit like a big one. But we lost a lot of people by snipers. And snipers is a mean way of getting rid of people you don't want. But we see if they can destroy a unit like us and kill all of us, which they never did. And because there were 4 units in our group, and there were only 2 groups in all of Europe, because it took a lot of equipment and a lot of intelligent people. And I managed to stay warm, and when it rained and sleeted, it was really sad. But we were well taken care of there. Whenever you had a bad day, so did everybody else.
Well, one of those days, things turned bad. German aircraft came in. And
yeah, we were just going out for, I think, breakfast. It was like dawn. And we had our mess kits, and they had a handle, and you hung your cup on there, and there were 2 pieces to it. And we were talking and waving around. All of a sudden, this airplane came over and strafed us. Fortunately, nobody got killed. I got a hole put in my mess kit that I could put my little finger in. And there were hedgerows over there, and they were made of bushes of thorns. Well, this one Jewish guy, he just flew in there, and when he come out, his clothes were all tattered, and he must have had 500 scratches on him, all bleeding. His name was Melwood. But then he made one more pass and never came back. You got to realize those planes are flying 300 or 400 miles an hour, and they're 6 feet over your head. So everybody scatters. And then this plane only had apparently a machine gun in its nose, because a lot of them had one on each wing and one on the nose, so we didn't lose people, I think, because of the way it was equipped.
Along came the Battle of the Bulge, and you swung north and headed for Belgium and things like that. What was your part in the Battle of the Bulge? Were you were doing the same thing that you always did?
Well, the Battle of Bulge was sad in one way because the Germans had no gasoline, they had no food, and some of the Messerschmitts were parked alongside the Autobahn side by side, maybe 50 of them. So they wanted you to capture somebody because they changed codes again and see if we could capture them alive so we could find out what they're doing. But it didn't last very long because we had everything we needed, and when we asked for tanks and planes, we got them, so that's what that was, more or less.
Now, as you moved on towards, you didn't go in directly into Germany. You swung south, and where did you go when once you crossed the Siegfried Line, and you swung south, and it started towards the end of the war at that time?
Well, at the end of the war, we went into Germany, and we were in Rosenheim, and we were there were three. We were in Bonn, we were in Rosenheim, and we were in a city near Rosenheim is where all the damage was, but we were in about 5 different cities, and it was about 20 miles from there to Salzburg, Austria, and there, right near there was Ludwig's Castle, and it was an amazing place. If you can imagine a castle with all the windows and doors broken open, and the dining room table still had dishes on it, and silverware and glassware, and it was tapestries and furniture and everything. And people went in there and they walked on the tables and they stole stuff. And we weren't there so long, but I brought home one little thing that I found on the ground there. It was a King Ludwig's coat of arms. But there was a rest camp there, and it was really a resort. And Hitler had built it in 1937, and then in 1943 or 42, Patton bought it, and we remodeled it and repaired it, and it became a rest area for military and injured people. And when the war ended, I and several other soldiers volunteered to stay there and cook and take care of the soldiers until they were able to go home and not look emaciated. And they had boats, and they had swimming, and they had all kinds of things that the guys could enjoy themselves with. And it was a fun place. It was beautiful. It was on a place called the Zimsee, and there were the Zuiderzee and Zimsee, and they were mountains, and they separated Austria from.
Now you also went to the concentration camps, and you took some pictures of.
Yes, and I went to Dachau and Buchenwald. Gas chambers, terrible places. There were bodies piled, had the foot sitting there waiting to be burned up, as tall as I am, and children as well. people really don't learn enough about wars and what they do to families and what they do to society and culture. It saddens me all the time.
Genocide. At some point, you had enough points to come home. Was 300?
330 or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, at some point you had enough points to come home. How did you get home? Did you take trucks back, or by that time did they have train?
We went to, I don't remember much, but we went to a deportation place, and we come home by a boat. And I'm laughing because in certain places you could buy with American stamps jewelry, diamonds, small things you could carry, and I sewed them in my field jacket. And when we got to the Statue of Liberty, I was waving that jacket around and I almost lost it. And when Walter and we went to a camp in Pennsylvania where we got discharged. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Indian Town Gap. Indian Town Gap.
Indian Town Gap. And Walter and I were still together then. And brought up that we should make a deal. So we did. And we shook hands and hugged on it. We met every year at some national park in America for 64 years. And he died 4 years ago. And I'm little and he's big, and every time he got out of his car, he would put his hand on my head and say hi to the man because he knew it irked me. But we would get out of our cars and we would have no matches, no food, no water, no anything, and never been there before. And we stayed for 7 or 8 days, and every day I had food to eat, and every day we went swimming in whatever we found to swim in, and he would kill squirrels and rabbits and catch fish and find a way to cook them. And he'd find a way to make a fire. It's if you get that intimate and that close to somebody for 64 years, I would not be alive, I wouldn't be the person if I didn't have Walter in my life. Because to him there was no excuse. He never got angry, he never threatened me, but you learn quickly because he'd find a way to punish you. He would hide, make me feel like I was alone, or I would be looking for my food. And he had it, but he wanted me to know that I needed him. And then if I got sick, he'd know I was sick before I was sick. He'd go out and he'd be gone for an hour and he'd come back with stuff and he'd say, eat this. I was never really sick, never had diarrhea, never had any problem.
Well, at some point in 1948, you got married.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get into, during that period of time, you kind of started your own business. And just briefly, what was that business that you got started?
At the government's expense, I was able to go to the Sorbonne in Paris to study interior design. And then I studied in Rome, and then I came back and went to work in Cleveland at Terry W. Sims, a little design shop, and that's where I learned basics of decorating. Then I was hired out of there by Mr. Mastic, which was the #1 store there. And I did very well. My talent is absolutely mind-boggling. And there were 3 other decorators there, and I used to ask them questions. And they wouldn't answer because you had to learn on your own or you were never a good decorator. But then I sold a lot of carpet from Lee's Carpet. And my wife had a relative die, and we went to a funeral. And I was obsessed with how terrible it was. It had blue battleship linoleum on the floor. It had wicker chairs painted with aluminum paint. It was ugly. And I think life ought to be ended with beauty rather than all that sorrow. I don't believe anybody ever dies anyhow. So I wanted to decorate funeral homes. And I wanted to create funeral homes. So I found a man who had a business called Superior Funeral Supply. Morris was Jewish. He was about 47 or 48 years when I went to see him the first time. And he says, I think you got a good thing. Well, I found that people thought I was crazy. So one day he tells me, I got you a client. So, and they were people from Czechoslovakia, and they didn't speak very good English, and they had a red brick building. And I tried to do what I wanted to do, but they didn't like me, and they didn't believe me, and they didn't believe in what I wanted. But so I found a way to get them to do the job anyhow. And the next day, I go into work, and Morris comes in my office, and the first words out of his mouth was, you stole some money. I said, I did not steal any money. And he said, anytime you manipulate a sale, no matter how big or how small it is, you're a thief. I cried, I got upset, I said, I'll quit. He said, no, you're going to grow up. And I was making $53.16 a week take home. We went to Chicago to a merchandise mart, which was the largest building in the world. There's 15 square miles on each floor. You want me to stop?
No. Basically, you started remodeling funeral homes and did quite successfully in it. And later on, you got to do churches and some little cathedrals, or large cathedrals, through your practice over your 67
years.
67
Well,
years?
when I worked at Mastix, I got to do the 9th Street Cathedral in Cleveland. The strips of carpet were 200 feet long. And it was my first church. And then I made friends with the priest and the cardinal there. And it ended up that I did the altar all in cardinal red carpet. And the rest of it was a design carpet. But I selected the color scheme from that and all. I made no profit on it. And it was my first church. And I really, the church I go to now is built in 1856. I've been going there for 70 years. And in the last 20 years, I completely restored it. And I did one in Binghamton, New York, and I did one in Stephenville, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and I did another one in Michigan someplace.
How do you, the reunion with your wife, you had 5 children?
Yep.
And what was the combination of grandchildren and great-grandchildren?
Well, altogether, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, there's 39. When we get together at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, there's 57 of us if we can get them all there. We have 2 missionaries, one's in Africa and one's in South America. And I have Kevin in Alaska.
At this time, I would like to thank you for your service to the nation, to the country. You gentlemen did an outstanding job for which you had to work with. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.